So we're here today to do a book review on this book here. It's When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. When I say by Paul Kalanithi, there is also an epilogue that is written by his wife. I think her name was Lucy. It was Lucy, wasn't it? Yeah. So Paul was an oncology surgeon, and at a very young age, he was in his 30s, wasn't he?
Yes.
And diagnosed, I think, in his 20s.
No, he was 37 when he
Passed.
died.
Yeah.
Is that a spoiler alert?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So certainly his life was cut very, very short, and far shorter than mine. And here's me feeling sorry for myself. So reading this story actually makes me realise that some people get it worse than me. That's probably the first thing I would say about how this book affected me. Just to make it very clear, Caroline nor I are in any way sponsored by this book. We will earn nothing whether you buy it or don't buy it. I have looked on Amazon just then, and in Australian dollars, the paperback is about $20 delivered, and on Kindle it's about 17 Australian dollars. In American dollars, that's between 10 and 12 American dollars. So you're not looking at a huge outlay to buy this book. And in terms of what it will do for your life, I think you will get incredible value for money by buying it. So what Caroline and I have done is we've marked a few pages out that spoke to us. They're mainly from the second half of the book, and that's just a function actually of I was halfway through the book before I decided that it might be a good idea to do a book review. But perhaps it's also that the second half of the book hits harder. Would you?
Well, yeah, because the rest of the story is just kind of framing his earlier medical career.
Yeah. So look, we'll try not to give you any spoiler alerts. I guess the one spoiler that's obvious is that Paul is no longer with us. But I think that will not in any way reduce your enjoyment of the book. The first quotation or the first passage that Caroline and I want to talk about is one that I paraphrased a couple of videos back, and I actually paraphrased a second saying of the concept, and Caroline is actually going to read out the original because it's more powerful than the one that I paraphrased. You ready to go?
Yep. So he says, I began to realise that coming in such close contact with my own mortality had changed both nothing and everything. Before my cancer was diagnosed, I knew that someday I would die, but I didn't know when. After the diagnosis, I knew that someday I would die, but I still didn't know when. But now I knew it acutely. The problem wasn't really a scientific one. The fact of death is unsettling, yet there is no other way to live.
So that passage speaks to me. Oh, here we go.
Well, it speaks to us both, but in different ways, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's only natural given that we have different perspectives on of our life trajectory from here.
Yes, well, we're in different seats in the car, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. So, as a stage 4 cancer patient, I can report to all of you that Paul's words there are absolutely correct, and apply to me too. Before I was diagnosed, of course I knew I was going to die, and I didn't know when. And now that I am diagnosed, I still know I am going to die. I still don't know when.
As do I.
Yeah, as do you. So
Yeah.
we share that in common, and yet for me it is more acute.
Yeah.
But it's what I find interesting about that is it almost shouldn't be more acute for you, because if I could pass on to you one thing and to the viewers, it's live your life well as if you do just have 2 or 5 years to live. Because I'd reflect to you that since my diagnosis, colours are more bright, tastes tastes are more vibrant,
Yeah.
and life just feels more precious, and it's a shame that you need to have that terminal diagnosis to come to that realisation. So what I would say to you, and what I would say to you is, put yourself in my shoes, but without actually having the terminal diagnosis, if you don't have it, to do see the vibrancy in the colours, and to do really feel that flavour in the food and the world around you, and enjoy that without having to actually receive that terminal diagnosis first, because the reality is you are terminal, and you are too.
Yeah.
The difference is, for me, it's acutely aware, and that's what Paul says in this passage. For me, it's acutely aware, but it is aware for you, and learn the lesson without having to pay the price, and live your life well, knowing that would, and I think that's quite profound.
And it's something that you hear people say who either have been diagnosed as terminal, or who have survived a life-changing illness like cancer, or a life-changing accident,
Yeah.
Or event like a terrorist attack, or that type of big impact event, is you could drop dead tomorrow, so you enjoy the time you've got. And we hear it all the time, but I think when you haven't lived that experience, it's really hard to go, well, what does that look like if I live my life like I might die tomorrow? Because at the same time, I've also got to plan for the possibility that I might live until I'm 95, like 3 of my grandparents did. And if I live until I'm 95, I've got to have money, and I've got to have this, and I've got to have that. So there's that kind of paradox, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess it is a paradox, because on the one hand, you're preparing for the worst and you're hoping for the best.
Yes.
So
which is something we talked about yesterday, and
we did.
We might circle back to that.
So just to let you know, this was a private conversation Caroline and I had yesterday, but I'm quite happy to share it with you. Caroline commented that when I thought I had 5 years to live, I was quite happy. When I found out I had probably 2 years to live, I got quite sad. And Caroline made the comment, why don't we make a 5-year plan, and why don't we make a 2-year plan? Because we always say, plan for the worst, but hope for the best. And Caroline and I agreed that we would do that.
And then I said, why don't we plan for the worst, but also plan for the best, rather than hope for the best?
Yeah, and just to be clear, there's 2 advantages to that. One is it allows you to, if you like, bracket how things can work out for you, because it's entirely possible I do live longer than 2 years, but I don't make 5. It's possible I make 3. So there's a lot to be said for planning out those what if things go well situations. The other thing is, and we won't go into this too much now, but Caroline is going to carry on a legacy. Whew.
Do you want me to talk?
Yeah.
We've got a semi-plan that I don't know if we're ready to share it.
We're not going to share it now, but what I'll say is there's a legacy that Caroline is going to carry on after I've passed. And one of the advantages of me writing a 5-year plan, even if I only live for 2, is it means for the first 3 years after I've passed, Caroline will exactly know what my wishes would have been. And whilst I, of course, entrust Caroline to act as I would, it's very useful for Caroline to actually have that written down in a plan, and know absolutely this is what Paul would have done at this time had he been alive. So that was another reason why the 5-year plan we thought was a great idea. So we are going to do it. Okay, let's carry on with the book review.
All right.
So the next section I wanted to talk about is further on, and it's to do with perspectives. So this is the quote. In the end, it cannot be doubted that each of us can see only part of the picture. The doctor sees one, the patient another, the engineer a third, the economist a fourth, the pearl diver a fifth, the alcoholic a sixth, the cable guy a seventh, the sheep farmer an eighth, the Indian beggar a ninth, the pastor a tenth. Human knowledge is never contained in one person. It grows from the relationships we create between each other and the world, and still it is never complete. And truth comes somewhere above them all, where, as at the end of that Sunday's reading. So that spoke to me insofar as we all have perspectives, and as we pointed out earlier, just between Caroline and I, we have different perspectives on these. But I would relate to you that even through my YouTube channel, I'm seeing the perspectives of people that that are religious or are non-religious or are very atheist or anti-theist indeed. I'm seeing perspectives of people that have stage 1, 2, 3, 4 cancer, early stage, late stage. I hear from doctors, oncologists, medical professionals, nurses, yeah. But I also hear from librarians and school teachers and unemployed people and children. So as the passage says, the human knowledge is never contained in one person. It grows from the relationships we create between each other and the world, and still it is never complete. And the truth comes somewhere above all of them. So that to me speaks that I am part of the whole, but I am certainly not the whole, and none of us are.
And maybe this channel and this community that you've created or become part of is like a microcosm of that. You know,
Yeah.
Everybody in that group is sharing perspectives that are different, but all of them are valid. And one of the things I've really noticed is every now and then the odd comment creeps in from someone that's maybe not particularly nice,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
you know, maybe has an agenda. And what I'm seeing is this lovely thing happen where you might not respond to it, but all of the people out there are responding with comments like, I think I saw yesterday or the day before, someone said to someone who was being particularly kind of not very nice.
Right.
And one of you out there, I'm sorry, I can't remember who it was, said to them, I can't imagine what pain you've suffered in your life to want to attack Paul like this, sending you all the love. And I thought, what a beautiful way to respond to hate and nastiness is to respond
Was
with
that the one that
love.
was talking about money?
Yes, and you were saying that you were asking for money. I was like,
and by the way,
I've never
asked for money. It very clearly says on my description, I don't have a GoFundMe and I never will have a GoFundMe. I purely am documenting this journey because I wish to leave a legacy and a story behind. Well, whilst I'm not super rich, I have enough money to get to the end of my life. I genuinely do not need GoFundMe money, and I don't want to ask for it. So stick with my channel. I'm never going to ask you for money. I'll perhaps suggest you might spend a bit of money buying a book, for example, but that's for you. I'm not going to ask for money from you to me. That's not going to happen. And that person made not only an unkind comment, it was actually just factually incorrect.
Yeah. But I think my point was all of those perspectives, and sometimes we see perspectives that we don't agree with or don't land particularly nicely, but it is someone's perspective.
Yeah.
Based on their life experience. I mean, we don't know that person's story. It may be that something awful has happened to them, whatever, but that is their perspective, and it's a valid one, perhaps, in their realm of what they think is truth.
Yeah. So I'll move on to the next passage that we want to quote out of the book. This is getting late in the book at this point. And it says, "Time for me is now double-edged. Every day brings me further from the lows of my last relapse, but closer to the next recurrence and eventually death. Perhaps later than I think, but certainly sooner than I desire. There are, I imagine, two responses to this realization. The most obvious might be an impulse to frantic activity, to live life to the fullest, to travel, to dine, to achieve a host of neglected ambitions. Part of the cruelty of cancer, though, is not only that it limits your time, it also limits your energy, vastly reducing the amount you can squeeze into a day. It is a tired hare who now races. Even if I had the energy, I prefer a more tortoise-like approach. I plod, I ponder. Some days I simply persist. If time dilates when one moves at high speeds, does it contract when one moves barely at all? It must. The days have shortened considerably." And for those of you that remember, even just yesterday, I think it was, when I pulled up my shirt and I showed you the amount of ascites that I have at the moment, Paul talks here about being further from his last relapse but closer to the next recurrence. I am going through a cycle of pain as I gain ascites and then have the ascites drained, and then I gain more ascites and I have it drained. When I am drained, I feel okay. I almost feel relatively normal. Now that I'm very heavy with ascites as I make this video, I can feel there's pain on my diaphragm. I'm feeling pain on the front of my sacrum. For those ladies amongst you that have been through a pregnancy, I have spoken to some women, and they say it sounds a bit like the pains you feel during pregnancy, of just everything inside your abdomen is being squeezed, and it just hurts. And so every day that I live, I am in this cycle of getting worse and worse and worse with the pain of my ascites, and then I get drained and I feel better. However, every time I get drained, I'm losing albumin, which is bringing me closer to death. Because for those of you that don't know, I am going to die of ascites, and the actual mechanism of that is going to be that I'm going to, as I understand it, and please, if you're an oncologist, correct me, because I do want to understand this absolutely. My understanding is that my blood is going to run short of albumin, and I'm going to eventually die of effectively blood poisoning. So every time they drain me of ascites, I feel better, but I'm actually closer to death, and that's quite a sobering realization. The last passage is only 2 pages after that, and we're very much towards the end of the book as I read this part. And the passage reads, "Everyone succumbs to finitude. I suspect I am not the only one who reaches this pluperfect state. Most ambitions are either achieved or abandoned. Either way, they belong in the past. The future, instead of the ladder towards the goals of life, flattens out into a perpetual present. Money, status, all the vanities the preacher of the Ecclesiastes described, holds so little interest, a chasing after wind indeed." Now, this passage spoke to me for several reasons, and one is unusual, so I'll just explain that to you. And that's, one of my things in life is I've taught English as a second language, and the pluperfect verb tense is one that I often have trouble explaining to people that have English as a second language. And I dare say that a lot of you that have English as a first language do not know what pluperfect means. It means something that happened in the past that had something else happen relative to it. So to give you a pluperfect sentence, I would say, when I came home last night and put my key in the door, I noticed a cat run past. So we are in the past, something specific in the past, and something happened in relationship to that in the past. That is the pluperfect tense of the English language. And what this paragraph is talking about is, I suspect I'm not the only one who reaches this pluperfect state. So what he's saying there is everything for him is in the past. Everything for him is relative to things in the past. And I feel like that. It also says things, money, status, and all the vanities of the preachers the Ecclesiastes described have so little interest, are chasing after the wind indeed. And this is something that's occurred to me recently as a YouTube content provider. Of course, I watch my subscriber stats and I see them going up. And it's been an interesting analysis for me as to whether I'm egotistical to think whether, hey, it's great that I got an extra 200 subscribers today, or it doesn't matter. I've had to really search within myself as to how I feel about that and how that relates to me egotistically, like whether I would turn into some kind of egomaniac if instead of 13,000 subscribers I had 1.3 million. And I've come to the conclusion that I think I would still be exactly me. And as proof of that, if you go back to my videos when I had 100, 200 subscribers, you'll see that the person speaking is the person pretty much in front of the camera right now. I don't believe I've changed in any way. Well, since then I've got cancer, so I have changed, but I certainly don't think I've become egotistical. And I would certainly say that having stage 4 cancer makes it very hard to become egotistical. So I now look at my YouTube subscriber numbers quite differently. Not quite differently. I have more clarity on how I feel about it. And the clarity I feel is that now I'm really pleased when my numbers go up, but not because I feel like I'm more popular or I'm a bigger, more ego person. How I feel about it is that now my message is reaching more people. And because I think that my message is a good one, I feel like I'm getting my message to a wider audience, and that has to be a good thing. So that's how I feel about that. And on the very next page is the last sentence that I'll quote you out of this book. And it's that words have a longevity that I do not. And this is actually on the last page that Paul writes before the first page that Lucy, his wife, writes. And this speaks why I'm on this channel now, because Paul's words have lived beyond his life in this book here. And my words are going to live beyond my life through this video, and perhaps through some words that I've written on Substack and what have you. And this is a wonderful feature of the world, the modern world that we live in, that we have things like books and we have things like video logs where words and messages can have a longevity beyond your own mortal life. And I'm very pleased to be able to record this for you. I know that this video will live longer than I will, and I'm very pleased for it. And clearly Paul was happy about that too. So that's the last quote that I'd like to quote from this book. Words have a longevity that I do not. Those are Paul's words, Paul Kalanithi. They're also, if I can paraphrase him, they are the words of this Paul too. Words have a longevity that I do not. So that's the book. I know plenty of you have bought it already because you've already told me. I'll just put it like that. So yeah, there we go. Good one, good one, Kazi. When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. An inexpensive book. It's a book that affected me. I think it would be true to say it affected you as well.
Yeah.
We recommend it. Is there anything you want to add, or?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think you've captured it.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll wind up there. So that's our book review of When Breath Becomes Air, and we'll make some more videos soon. So thank you for joining us. Be kind, make good choices. Thank you very much.
Bye.
See ya.